So you want to be a mage in Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree? Lately I've been hearing that the new sorceries suck, there are barely any new intelligence options, and Shadow of the Erdtree has forsaken us mages. Is that really true though? Embracing the shadows means we have now more options than ever before, with powerful additions from various schools of magic to our arsenal of sorceries and weapon skills, making the mage more powerful than ever. What can we say? Long live the mage. In the base game I made a bunch of mage builds, as you may know, and today we're continuing the mage adventure with the impact of the DLC. So how does Shadow of the Erdtree treat mages exactly? Well, it adds 14 sorceries and 1 magic Ash of War, and you can do some really disgusting things combining the various aspects. Intelligence mages are eating good with this DLC, because look at this. This is the magic Ash of War that I was talking about, and let's start off with that, because it is something else, as you see. It does absolutely nuclear damage, and you can grab it right away when you enter the DLC zone. Convenient, right? Remember Carrion Grandeur from the base game? I did some videos about that too. Well, this is that, but on many steroids, and it has a follow-up now, in the form of a horizontal destructive slash. But aside from the insane damage, it deals absolutely ridiculous poise damage too. Stands breaking bosses like it's nothing. Let's take a main boss from Shadow of the Erdtree for example. No spoilers of course, because yeah, it's still early, but I censored everything here. But let me just show you it on a prolific boss of the DLC. If you land both the hit and the follow-up, it just shreds them to pieces and can also stance break them at the same time. And here, another example of a late game Shadow of the Erdtree boss. Yeah, the damage is, yeah. And it comes with really good hyper armor too, so even while you're getting beat up left and right, you don't care about all of that. You just keep conjuring your big blue magical sword for annihilation. How do you get this though? Is it going to require an entire quest line and do 8 million things? No, you want to go to the Mage Valhalla basically of Shadow of the Erdtree, which is very easy reachable. It's this region, the part with the Cathedral of Manus Mythier, and where it looks like there's a huge pool party going on, and there is. You want to bypass Castle Ensis for this like this, as drawn out on the map. If you want to see the full walkthrough in addition to the map here, check my other videos where I also showed you this skip as well. A link for that will be in the description, as for now we have no time to waste. In the Skadu Altus region, you basically want to enter the Morth runes. Right next to the Morth rune side of Grace, you have to basically just crawl through the cracks of these runes till you get out again on the other side, because there you will end up at the Bani village. And then from Bani village, trek onwards to the Cathedral of Manus Mythier. It is quite linear. Inside, you'll find Ymir. This is your guy as a mage in Shadow of the Erdtree. Like half the sorceries are obtained through him. He's the plug, let's say. But first, let's get Carrion Sovereignty. It is right outside the cathedral as well, as a little welcome bonus. You go to the cave southwest of the cathedral, down the cliff. It will be on a scarab on the roof. Just nuke it with any ranged option, and congratulations, you now have the Mage Ash of War of Shadow of the Erdtree. Now this Ash of War might be a tad too busted. If it stays like this, well, enjoy being a mage. In the future, it will probably still be great damage-wise, but alternatively, there's also a new Gold Ash of War in the game that you can infuse as magic as well, and is a really good alternative too, and can be gotten early on as well. Lucky. It's the Divine Beast Frost Stomp Ash of War, basically another super buff version of an old Ash of War, the Hoarfrost Stomp Ash of War of the base game. This one does a lot more damage though, is FP efficient, is chargeable, and comes out really quick, so making it a good pair and alternative for Carrion Sovereignty. It is also an AoE Ash of War for when you want to quickly get rid of a bunch of enemies, and it deals very well with all the verticality of the DLC zone, since it can traverse upwards and downwards extremely well. You can also do a bunch of damage with just one cast if you get the positioning right versus bosses, and all of that is supplemented by the fact that it can also apply Frostbite on your enemies for even more damage. Overall, a really good Ash of War too. You get it from the first boss in the DLC zone, so kill that with Carrion Sovereignty for example, and then try out both options to see what you like the most, since swapping is done in a second, or you can just use them both at the same time. Alright, so we have our weapon skills covered as a mage. What do we put them on though? Well, there is only one option really, the Lizard Greatsword. We're becoming the Lizard Wizard, and yeah, you heard it correctly. You'll notice that there are barely any new unique intelligence or intelligence catered weapons in the DLC, so we have to go with the option that is the most mage-esque while being powerful at the same time. And this weapon checks all the marks. It has very low requirements in irrelevant stats like strength and dexterity, so it's efficient to use, and we can keep focusing on intelligence. It gets a ton of attack rating as well with the magic infusion. Look at those numbers, which we will use obviously, and since it scales very well with magic, we can also use it to get rid of annoying things quickly when we don't want to waste FP, and do so while utilizing the Greatsword moveset, since it is in fact a Greatsword which has both nice normal attacks and charged attacks. But wait, there is more. Since it's a Greatsword, we will also get extra poise when using our Ashes of Wars like Carrion Sovereignty, meaning it will be less likely for us to get interrupted when we use our big magical sword. And that is obviously important for actually getting all that damage in. And then there's even more. Who would have thought, right? Who would have thought that this thing is so good? Well, the charge attack version of this weapon has a projectile that you shoot off when you use said charge attack. So if you don't want to waste FP and get rid of mobs from a distance, that is completely possible too with this projectile, or if you just want to poke enemies in there. Yeah. And this unique aspect of this weapon fits the mage ranged caster playstyle very well. You can also use this projectile to build up status effects from a distance, by the way, like Frostbite, if you would go for the cold infusion alternatively. So that's a cool fun fact that you can play around with as well. In conclusion, there is a great variety of arguments to become a lizard wizard. But most importantly of all of them is also that it looks great and you can see the sword shine beautifully through your Ashes of Wars and have all those style points while killing off your enemies. Now you get this weapon from all the imps with a lion head in the game, so you can obtain as many as you want really. You really can't miss them. If you quickly want to farm one, however, right when you enter the DLC zone, just go to the castle front side of Grace, then go to the north to the Fog Rift Catacombs and just farm the imps there. There's a side of Grace right nearby and you can quickly get this beautiful sword yourself. Put your Ash of War on this thing and we have now half of the video covered. But don't go in yet, because we have our weapon and weapon skill locked down, but we haven't talked about sorceries. And what is a mage really without sorceries? Like I said earlier, the DLC introduces 14 new sorceries, but we can immediately write off 2. The Mantle of Thorns, which gives you extra damage when you roll into your enemies, which is a completely very practical use case of course, but yeah, it's not that much damage. And Miriam's Vanishing on the other hand, this spell looks very cool and you can in fact dodge enemies like a badass mage with it, but it's too slow and janky to actually utilize it effectively. Get that thing out of my sight. So with the troll spells out of the way, we have 12 sorceries left and you can get a bunch of them very early on actually in the shadow areas as well. Let's start with the early obtainable ones, and we do that with going back to our BFF Ymir. Ymir has a quest line that nets you a bunch of sorceries, and I won't spoil his quest line in this video. You have to just do that yourself and you know, figure things out. But I'm going to discuss the sorceries that you can obtain through him because that is important for our mage build. Very early on you can get both the Glintstone Nail and Glintstone Nail sorceries through his questline. Glintstone Nail is actually a very decent FP efficient, chargeable bread and butter type of sorcery in the style of Glintstone Pebble and the Comet type of sorceries of the base game, but this one deals a lot of damage actually for how little it costs and how much range you get with it. It can travel very far with great tracking on top of that too, and it's also very practical in the open world to quickly get rid of mobs. Glintstone Nails on the other hand is more damage because there are multiple projectiles now and more pressure for a higher FP cost. But that doesn't really matter when you want to get damage in quickly. What makes a sorcery specifically good versus bosses is its tracking capability. Even if the boss dodges the initial potential hit, the projectiles will still reroute and track aggressively towards the boss, and the damage is actually very good for a tool that provides nice sustained damage like this. So both the nail sorceries have nice use cases. Another sorcery that you then can get at the start is the Glint Blade Trio sorcery. You get this one in Castle Ensis, just randomly laying around on a body at the southeast part of the castle, and it's very similar to Magic Glint Blade from the base game. Magic Glint Blade is a great sorcery, as you may know, and here you now have 3 of them at the same time. Use case will then be to use it preemptively, since the swords will linger around till an enemy approaches, meaning you can use it as a tool to get guaranteed damage in. These ones don't stack however, but you can chain cast them to get the previous Glint Blades out faster for faster damage if you want. Another sorcery that can then be obtained early on is the Fleeting Microcosm spell. It is another spell tied to the plug, Ymir. If you prioritize his questline, you can get it very fast. Doing so grants you the opportunity to get this, and it's worth it, I will tell you that, because it's going to be your Shadow of the Erdtree AoE nuclear tool for most of the time. It gets rid of a bunch of mobs and it has an amazing reach. So that's then also your use case with the spell for this build. Use it to quickly clean out rooms, to quickly make sure no one is bothering you when exploring. It can push off enemies from elevated areas for an instant kill too, and on top of that, it can also stagger mobs and the bigger ones too, giving you great control over many different areas in the game. A must-have sorcery with amazing visuals. Another sorcery that you then can get right away is the Rings of Spectral Light sorcery that can be obtained in the Shadow's hidden grave near the Cerulean Coast site of Grace. From the castle front side of Grace, you can reach the Cerulean Coast like this, and there go to the cave to obtain the sorcery. This is a sorcery that is best used as an opener or to spam it quickly with its uncharged version in my opinion. Why? Well, 2 reasons. reasons. It has insane range and you shoot off a bunch of projectiles at once, so it's good pressure, but it also builds up frostbite. So as an opener, spam it to get the frostbite application while your boss is still somewhere in the distance. And frostbite means an initial extra burst of damage, but also a damage buff for all your next spells and attacks, hence why it's a great opening spell. Another great spell that you can get relatively early on is the Impenetrable Torn spell. As you may know, with bypassing Castle Ences, as I showed you before, you can just move on towards the Shadow Keep if you like to get this sorcery very early on. Yes, there is Hippo in the way, but using our weapon skills at fight should be completely doable. This one is broken. It is Briars of Punishment from the base game, but on many steroids. It does absolutely disgusting damage. There's just not much to say about it. It's a mix of many thorns hitting your enemy instantly and just pretty much applying blood loss instantly, since the spell builds up blood loss. So huge damage spikes in one go from a huge range as well that can be spammed. Is this sorcery completely overpowered? Absolutely. Get it while it's still hot. Then back to the plug. Ymir for another good sorcery. Cherishing Fingers is the name of this sorcery, and this is going to be your reactionary defensive turnaround sorcery. And what it does is very simple. It can ward off any incoming spells with the fingers that surround you, so it has a barrier type of functionality. But if you cast it to attack enemies that are bothering you up close, then you can in fact push those enemies off you and stagger them as well, and use that momentum to combo it with your spells and Ashes of Wars, for example. That will then lead in a great combo that can do a lot of damage in just a matter of seconds. With those 7 sorceries then discussed, we have pretty much talked about all the sorceries that are obtainable early on, and we will give you a powerful roster of sorceries as a mage. You can get another sorcery quite early on too, after defeating the boss of Castle Ences, also known as the double to triple moon spell. It is not that great unfortunately, however, in its current state, because you can get hit out of it. It takes a long ass time to cast, and if you're going to attack things in melee range, well, Cherishing Fingers will do a better job. But in the off chance that you can manage to get all 3 instances of damage off on a target, then the damage can definitely be very respectable. Now respectable is not good enough and we need good stuff, and the 2 new gravitational spells are exactly that. But both of them are locked behind a boss fight, so you have to progress somewhat to get both of them. When you do, however, it is party time. Gravitational Missile is really good. When you cast it, make sure to charge it for even better results. It will basically pulse for a few instances of drawing in enemies and staggering them as well to set you up for its explosion. And the explosion, well, is an actual explosion. It can annihilate the entire room. You can also skip the first part if you want. Just aim the sorcery at the ground in that case to get the massive explosion right away, which can make quick work of bosses and invaders. However, due to the first part of the spell buying time for you basically, it's actually also a very good spell to combo it with another spell like the earlier mentioned Fleeting Microcosm. 2 big boy AoE spells combined with a lot of staggers and everything, yeah, the results will be juicy. Or you can combine it with Blades of Stones, for example, to get even more staggers and good damage in. And Blades of Stones is the other gravitational spell that I already hinted at, and I do really be liking this spell too, just for the fact that it sticks onto your enemies. It moves with them and thus has great sustained damage in the process of doing so. It's another spell that you can charge for more damage, and enemies will have a hard time dodging it. It's great for clearing a bunch of enemies quickly and controlling them at the same time too. And then finally, we have 2 more spells that allow you to cast the Blue Flames. The Putrescence spells, very cool stuff, yeah. Locked behind progression, however, but worth getting, and especially the Vortex one in my opinion. When you have lost overview of what is happening, just cast this thing and it will incinerate everything around you basically. Thus, overall, in conclusion, a bunch of the new sorceries are great and have their use cases, and especially when you combine them, like with our Lizard Wizard, to get everything that you need and desire for a powerful all-round mage. Before we proceed, make sure to like, subscribe, you know how it works, and check my Patreon out if you want written guides or if you just want to support the channel. One more thing before you go loose in the DLC zone, make sure to also go on a scavenger hunt to grab those Erdtree fragments if you need more power and defenses very early on. You can already get up to like 15, maybe 20 different fragments with bypassing Castle Ences like I showed you before in the video, and they are open world drops mostly, so very easy to get. How does our setup look like as a mage in Shadow of the Erdtree then? Well, staff-wise, not much changes for a pure or practically pure intelligence mage. The Carrion Regal Scepter and the Luset's Glintstone staff still reign as the kings of staves with their amazing scaling at higher levels. Which one you want to use is then just purely up to preference. Both are great. 2 new staves were however introduced with the DLC, but they scale in a hybrid fashion, so not really relevant for this build. Look-wise, we then go according to the theme of the DLC, so we're becoming a Shadow Mage, a Shadow Lizard Wizard really, and I would say I might be biased, but my choices here look good. The armor set consists out of the new Shadow Militiaman hat that you get from the guys at the Shadow Keep, keep, the Knight's Cavalry armor from the base game, and then also the new Black Knight gauntlets and greaves dropped from the Black Knights all over the DLC zone. This puts us over 50 poise, so we meet that threshold of resisting hits that can stagger us out of our casting and attacking animations, which is really nice since it will overall make sure that we can keep damaging our enemies more consistently. And the combination of the various armor pieces that I went over also give very high defenses, which is very important for a mage that is locked in casting animations all the time. You don't want to get one shot. Hence, for talismans, we run the Dragon Crest Great Shield as our defensive talisman. For the tankiness, we then also run the Shard of Alexander for making both of our Ashes of War stronger, the Godfrey icon, since a lot of the new sorceries have in fact a chargeable component, as well as both of our Ashes of Wars, and finally the Magic Scorpion Charm to boost all of our damage, since we are purely dealing magic damage. The Magic Scorpion Charm has, as you may know, that trade-off, which does get completely negated with our setup, but if it's still not something you want, then alternatively you can also run the Graven Mask Talisman to just boost our sorceries with 8%, which is still also very nice. All talismans mentioned so far are from the base game, but there are two DLC talismans that are kind of interesting for a mage too. The first one being the Blessed Blue Dew Talisman, which slowly restores your FP with 1 FP every 2 seconds, and I like to use this talisman as a substitute for when you're exploring and just in the open world killing mobs to have your FP regenerate in the background for a more comfortable experience. In boss fights, however, I find it to be a tad too slow, especially as a mage where you have a continuous stream of FP consumption, so I don't find it worth to sacrifice a talisman slot for that. The Beloved Stardust is another strictly mage-oriented DLC talisman, which is basically like an upgraded version of the Radican icon, as it fully increases your spellcasting speed as if you would have 70 dexterity, but it comes with a very hefty trade-off in removing a bunch of your damage negation, so try it out at your own risk. Otherwise, the provided talisman set is going to be a very balanced and great setup. The Flask of Wondrous Physic is going to consist out of two very logical choices. I really like running the Magic Shrouding Crack tier and the Opaline Heart tier for a great mix between extra damage and extra defenses. Stats then at 150, obviously 60 vigor for the sustain, 21 endurance and 17 mind for the utility, stamina and gear options, 12 strength and 14 dexterity for our weapon requirements, and then 70 intelligence and 26 faith. This will allow you to cast all the sorceries of the DLC except for one that I didn't recommend, but a bunch of the new sorceries require a faith investment, like the completely busted Impenetrable Thorns, so the relatively low faith investment is nice. Through Golden Vow at 25 faith, you also get a lot more damage than you would get by fully soft capping on intelligence and getting 80 intelligence instead of 70, so it is another bonus, and you get also all the faith defensive buffs, for which the ones that you unlock at level 24 go up to 60% damage negation. So all around for a level 150 build, I really like this setup. If you run higher levels, just fully soft cap on intelligence and get more mind and endurance for the comfort. With that, we have pretty much discussed everything you need to know about being a mage in the DLC. How convenient, right? Obviously, a lot of spells and intelligence weapons of the base game are still really good as well, and I covered all of those as well, so I'll put a bunch of links in the description for you to go on a little binge watch for supplementing this DLC build with even more mage goodness.